welcome to Chair one more time. We are in episode
Hi.
13 of the Road to Self-Recognition because we can learn about ourselves through horror, believe it or not. And yesterday, was it you that you posted on, or you shared on Instagram? Was it a convention on grief, using horror to work on trauma? Why women, there's a high number of women going to see these productions, and it was a convention. Was it you? I saw that and I thought, oh, this is so great.
Probably someone else because I only posted about Twisters
Right.
yesterday, but
Mm.
Twisters was also about grief.
Okay, the film,
Yes.
Twister.
Yeah. The new film
I
that they
didn't-
made, the kind of sequel that they made to the 1996 hit Twister.
Right, yes,
It
yes.
starts with Daisy Edgar Jones's character losing three of her best friends because of a tornado.
Right.
And the film picks after 5 years later, you know,
Right.
after that
Yeah.
event. And yeah, it was also about grief because
Yeah,
she keeps remembering their faces, their voices,
of course.
and yeah, grief is on the rise. And I can tell you that much that um, filmmakers are talking more about it.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's why I thought that this Instagram post was yours because of the fact that there was also this event. So there was like a lot of people, like you do a manga event and then
You're talking about crime convention.
that's right. Maybe that's it, but it
Yes,
was
yes,
about
yes.
women
Yeah.
like
I did it. I shared that.
you see. Yeah.
Yeah, you remember right.
Yes.
And yeah, this was an article. It was it on Variety, something like that. Vulture, maybe Vulture.
Okay.
And this journalist went to a convention called CrimeCon, which is a true crime convention where people come together, experts come, and they talk about, true crime, you talk about crime, and there's cases, criminal cases, and these people, especially women, like the journalist says that 90% of them are women, and the other 10% are basically men brought there by their girlfriends or significant others. And yeah, it was such an interesting article. I read it in one breath, basically, because it talks about how these women dealt with their own trauma by watching true crime documentaries and talking about it in forums and making friendships based on true crime drama. So it was such an interesting thing
Yeah.
to read. And also, I could understand that my own research on grief and trauma is very relevant to this case, like
Yeah.
to this article as well.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It was a fantastic fact that you have picked on that. You noticed that. And also because when I was looking at, obviously, there was a real, what I saw, didn't read the article, but when I saw the real explanation of it and all the people there, I thought, you and I have been talking about this so much. And not
Mhm.
just you and I, we've also been chasing or investigating our cause through other researchers that talked about horror before us. And somehow I can find it so difficult to transmit this information sometimes. I don't know if you feel the same way when you're teaching, but I kind of find difficult to turn this preconceived idea of what crime, horror, all the things that we kind of are scared of or we don't like,
Mhm.
how we can turn that into something useful. And, because people have that preconceived idea and we box, oh, horror is this, and that. And it's always like low quality content. It's something that is not relatable to anything. It's mental, we're talking about now the Evil Dead Rising or the Evil Dead Rising that I watched.
That rising.
Rising, that's right. So if I had to talk about this film, the Alicia from 20 years ago, I would have said there's nothing there for me. Switch off, water pile off. There's only slasher because I'm not really keen on slasher films. which it was exactly my initial reaction of, oh my God, Tugce, what am I watching this? And my family going, but we were still watching it.
Yeah.
10, 20 years later, with the knowledge, you go, hang on a minute, what all this symbolizes, what it signifies. So is it the same for you? Do you find that there's like still a difficulty, but at the same time, it's so great to see other people talking about it?
It's actually it's great to see other people talking about it, talking about how to heal, and how to, watch a horror film and be affected in an emotional way and even a psychological way, I think. Because when I started, it was kind of my idea that I wanted to do something about trauma and horror and maybe other film genres
Mhm.
that could help people heal. It was my main goal, actually, to maybe talk about horror and make sure that everyone knows that horror is a genre you cannot, you cannot understate or, belittle. It's not it's not a right thing to do because horror is very political, it's
Yeah.
very psychological,
Yes.
and it's a very, very, very interesting genre in which people online argue that horror films make them feel better about themselves and maybe about their shortcomings, maybe about their traumas. And it's very interesting because
Mm.
you don't see a lot of other genres that people talk about this way.
Yeah.
So I am very happy with the current interest in horror in general because we see a lot of horror films these days. I mean, Maxine is in theaters, and there is a few weeks ago there was The Watchers by Ishiana M. Night. I mean, Ishiana Night Shahyamalan, and the I think next week there will be Longlegs in theaters. So it is a very interesting renaissance for
Mhm.
horror films, I think. And I like that interest on
Sure.
horror films because they are being taken rather seriously during these times. And I'm also very interested that people, especially filmmakers, are more keen on talking about grief and trauma in their films and in how they started to make, horror films.
Mm.
People are talking about this, even directors um talking about this. Jennifer Kent, very famously talking about the Babadook, she said that I had an experience and I thought that this film would would kind of make it okay and also make other people feel that things will be okay. And yeah, it's very important because filmmakers are aware of it, the audience is aware of it. So
Mm.
yeah, I find it very, very, very promising.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. You're making me think of a lot of stuff that I'm learning and experiencing in with also my students in the classes, and there's still like all these layers and there. Excuse me. We had, for example, a lovely comment that I want to bring up from one of our uh, members of the audience in
Mhm.
YouTube in Alice in Gothic Land. Well, really, it's Alice in Gothic Land, but it's inside Alice in Gothic Land, but it's the space that we have together. So the road to self-recognition, and one of our followers, as I was saying, her comment. I don't know if you remember well, but I'm just going to touch on some of the things that she mentioned there because it was
Mhm.
quite an interesting comment. I'm going to put my eyes on, otherwise I can see very well. Oh, that's better. So, yeah, she was saying something that she loved the topic that we talked about on episode 12, uh, of how to use horror and trauma films about what was it actually the title? I can't remember. But how to use these films like we were talking about
To
Godzilla.
heal.
to heal, and how your career studying and learning about grief and everything is taking you to look and analyze war films and all that. So we were in that space. And this person was saying that as a teenager she was drawn to horror movies. I think that's also something made to comments on, no? How teenagers tend to be quite drawn into that kind of film. Although I don't know the percentage of young kids, because I remember myself being very curious at a very early age, but I wouldn't have a clue of the statistics. But then she also mentions, and that's also very interesting, that she doesn't think that she was ready to really see the reason why yet and in time they overwhelmed her. So there was this attraction and at the same time like a kind of rejection. Very interesting as well. Probably at a psychological level there was something there that could be looked into. But then as an older person, when she turned 40, which is also quite an interesting figure, she rediscovers that love again, and then she is like the first time getting in contact again with horror. And then it's what she understood what they wanted to show her. And then is that when she goes down and starts looking and analyzing, and she elaborates a little bit more on this. And so yes, she's talking about spiritual bypassing. She's talking about abusive cycle she was in at the moment, rediscovering and family ties, and even PTSD she mentions there as a need to heal. You know, all this made her feel that she needs to heal and to be sane and balanced again. And also for her now, for her kids, because now she's a mom. So fascinating. I mean, it's so packed, this comment, with things that we've been talking about. So what is your view on this, and what was the first thing that you felt or thought when you read this comment, and how you started connecting it with everything that you are doing?
Yeah, I felt a sense of similarity. And because when I was researching for mourning, mourning in horror, grief in the 21st century horror films, I came across a lot of people online who who were basically saying that horror films help them, you know, overcome their fears or overcome their past trauma and try to deal with abuse and a lot of things that are, that you would think that horror would not heal but make it worse.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's very interesting because it's a very traumatic experience to watch a horror film. And but then what I understood from that is just like the article that I shared a few days ago, I think that's the thing. The thing is that we have trauma. All of us have trauma. And you can't compete traumas, as therapists always say. Um, but our own trauma is different from the fictional trauma that we are
Mhm.
watching. But through watching that fictional trauma that others are going through, but for example, in true crime documentaries, there are real traumas that people are going through,
Yeah.
but we are watching them as if they're fiction. So when we're watching them, we kind of put ourselves in their shoes and try to deal with that, being at a safe distance from the actual trauma. So I think it has the possibility of being a healing experience
Mhm.
to watch another trauma from a safe distance, from a distance that it can't hurt you, and feeling good about yourself, your own experience and your own trauma, and find the courage maybe to deal with your own trauma, with your
Mm.
own baggage. So I think that when I saw that comment, I immediately thought about my own reason to start, researching horror films because my grandfather, whom I loved very much, had died when I was 22. And he was the one that got me into horror because he would tell these very scary stories on the balcony to me and to my cousins and my brother. And they were all very scared. They would run away. And it would be only me and him by the end of the story. And I
Really?
would be like, tell me more. Is there more stories? And he would be like, my girl, it's very late. Come on. And I would be fascinated by his stories, which he claimed were true.
Yeah.
And they were about jinns and supernatural beings and stuff. And to me, it was so cool that he was face to face with these creatures, the supernatural beings, and he could survive to tell about it. And so he was kind of my hero, and I loved his stories. He was a great storyteller.
Right.
And when he passed, I realized that it was him that got me into, horror and reading horror stories, watching horror films, and it was kind of our thing. Horror was kind of our thing. And when it was time to write my MA dissertation, I immediately felt that, because I loved horror films, I was going to work on horror films anyway, but
Mm.
I thought that I actually overcame my own grief about my grandfather with watching films, with watching
Yeah.
horror films, by
Yeah.
watching horror films. So I thought that what better way to dive into that and try to understand how grief works, and in the meantime, honor my grandfather and our relationship, which was so dear to each one of us.
So,
So I think when I read that comment, I immediately thought about that moment with my own grief and with trauma that, steered me right into horror,
yeah.
right back again. So, yeah, I believe that horror heals people. It actually does. A lot of people talk about it. I don't think they're lying about their feelings and about their journeys. I always believe people. Even in this century, I always believe people and what they say about their emotional journeys. And um, and I truly believe that films can heal people.
Hmm.
In Wall Street Bashir, a film about Israel.
Yeah.
Um, the character says that can films be therapeutic? And I answer that with a resounding yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
it can heal people. It can be therapeutic
Yes.
because you're watching a similar trauma from afar, from a place that it won't hurt you.
Yes.
And I think it's very important. But the commenter always also said about first rejecting horror films because they were kind of too much, I guess.
Yeah.
And yeah, PTSD does that. It doesn't even matter if it's a horror film. There, if you have PTSD, you could even find a comedy film traumatic.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
if it's about your experience, if it triggers you, yes, you can find it. Even you can even find it a comedy traumatic. So
Absolutely.
PTSD is a very, very, very dangerous disease that should not be taken lightly anywhere. And I think it's getting more recognition,
Yes.
that people are talking more about it, and they should, because it's a very important thing.
Yeah.
And if horror films are finding and carving a way to help the survivors of PTSD, it's
Yeah.
all good. It's all good. And
Yeah.
I believe it can.
Yes, it can. Yes. And I'm thinking of, as you're talking, keep thinking of Supernatural. I keep bringing that up because that's a very good example of how even now, after so many years, they still doing conventions,
Yeah.
Supernatural and the bonding. that the
I
people.
actually started rewatching Supernatural on
Nice.
Amazon Prime. I'm on season 3.
Season three, fantastic. Oh, well, then we'll have to dedicate some time to that and see and get your opinion
Yeah,
because
yeah, we should do an entire episode on Supernatural.
oh, I love that. I love doing that.
Yeah,
Yes,
because it's oh my God, the grief on
exactly.
this show. When I
Exactly.
was watching this show, I was very young. I was, I think, 18 or 19 or
Yeah,
something. When it
yeah.
first started, I started watching it.
Right.
And I was in it for the scares. And I kind of had a crush on Sam Winchester.
Of course. And then on Dean as well,
Who
on both
doesn't?
and
Just
Castiel and everybody at different times, even Lucifer.
exactly. So basically when I was watching it, I of course I had no background and no idea about grief, and my grandfather was alive. So
Yeah,
I didn't experience any grief in my lifetime. And so now that I'm watching it, I'm like, oh my God, this whole show about losing your loved ones
exactly. And relationship.
repeatedly to
Yes.
weird circumstances.
Yes.
So yeah, I was like, I said to myself, the next time we talk, I have to talk to Alicia about it, that we
So,
should do an episode on Supernatural alone. Like
yes.
it's
No, no,
an incredible
absolutely.
thing.
Absolutely. But the a beautiful thing about this series is
Hmm.
how still after I think they stopped that. It's like now, yeah, with the pandemic, that was the last season. And so, yeah, it must be now 4 years. And
Yeah,
they're
probably.
still doing conventions. People are still bonding with them. They're still talking about bringing it back.
Hmm.
People connect with people. The stories. I mean, there's a couple of books written by a psychologist, Lynn. I can't remember the name now, but I've even talked to her, so it could be great
Hmm.
if we could have it in the show.
Oh,
Um,
it would
yeah,
be it would be awesome, actually.
Bernice, yeah, Lindsay Bernice. I don't know if she will because I'm waiting for the channel to grow a bit more to bring important people, you see. But
Oh, you're saying I'm not
not that you're
important people?
not important.
Oh my God.
Important people.
Joking, joking. Go on.
I was thinking of myself when I'm on my own. I want this to grow and then bring other important people.
Okay.
That came out
So
really
about
well.
Supernatural.
Yes, yeah, because she wrote this one book.
Books
She's got
about it.
many books. Yes, she's got Lindsay Bernice, that's the name.
Hmm.
And the book is Family Doesn't End with in Blood or with Blood.
Oh, interesting.
I've got it down. I've got it behind here. I'll show you it later if you want.
It's a research book on Supernatural.
Yes, yes, yes. And there's
Oh,
we have yes, I'll send you the name so then you
yeah,
see.
send me the names. I would like to
It's
read them.
really good because you have even different actors, even Sam Winchester, so Jed Padalecki, he writes about his own experience in Supernatural at the end because
Hmm.
he suffered, and I think he still has some depression problems.
Yeah.
So he talks about how he was dealing with his depression while in the show, the support he got,
Mm.
and you just, I mean, that comes through the acting.
Yeah.
And there were
Yeah.
moments where you could see, oh, this is so great. And it's because he was literally feeling this. And he got really a
Exactly.
hug from his colleague. He got a hug from Jensen
Jensen.
Ackles
Yeah.
because he was like breaking and he was falling apart. And it was really a touchy moment because the brotherhood in the film expanded in real life. So yeah, Lynn gets,
They are brothers.
they
Yeah.
are, they are,
Nobody can tell me otherwise. They're brothers, all
they
right.
are, they are.
If you work with someone for 15 years, you're brothers in my book. Your family.
Is the way, I mean, this is probably for another episode, but is the way they started bonding with each other from the beginning. They decided, right, if we're going to be in this together, we need to know each other. And they even moved in together. So they were behaving like family. And there was chemistry between them. There still is. And it's fantastic.
Yes.
But how that extended and expanded to other people that when you read the stories, people who were suicidal were
Yeah.
saved by the show. People who,
Exactly.
and these stories are just amazing, and the tattoos and the dreams and the everything that goes with it. It's
Mm.
fantastic. So I am kind of surprised when people say, no, I've not seen it. I'm like, how dare you? So, but yes, going back to because otherwise I'll be carried away with that. Going back to this message from these comments, there was an aspect of it, something that we could develop. There are like 10 points that we could expand on. But you were quite interested in the influence of New Age and spiritual bypassing. And by that, I mean that we could examine this concept of the spiritual bypassing and the impact on personal growth and trauma healing. So the experience of this person commenting can help us illustrate at a general or bigger context how we can perpetuate cycles of abuse and delay and genuine recovery. So it is what you are saying, you were talking about before, how it can help us recover if it's something that at the same time can bring back or touch on our PTSD, and how she probably we will need her here to tell us how she could actually find that help without being re-traumatized. And it will probably require a lot of investigation. But if we think of an example of this kind of similar situation with the Midnight Club, maybe
Yeah, true.
that could be probably a
Yeah,
serious.
there is actually a link. For those of us who don't know what spiritual bypassing is,
Mhm.
spiritual bypassing is basically attributing all your negative thoughts into something, spiritual, and but basically ignoring your negative emotions by using spiritual practices.
Right.
So, yeah, like yoga, for
Yes.
example,
Yes.
or praying. And so it's basically trying to pray away the the dark side of humanity. And it's not possible. It is simply not possible. And all the psychologists in the world will tell you so. And so if we try to say that, for example, oh, if it was fate, it was fate, or it was meant to be, it
Mm.
was written. And so you're basically attributing all of these, negative emotions that you're feeling, death or loss or breaking up with a partner,
Yeah.
as in, Evil Dead Rising, she's a single mother, right? She
Yes.
broke up with her partner. It's a loss. It's a grief. People tend to think that grief is only about dying people. It's not.
Correct. Yeah.
It's about losing someone or losing something, losing a feeling, losing yourself. It
Exactly.
doesn't matter.
Mm.
Sometimes, even if you miss the way that things were or used to be,
Absolutely.
that's grief.
Absolutely.
So, spiritual bypassing is just saying that, oh, it wasn't meant to be, it wasn't in the cards, uh, this and that, or always putting the entire thing on a spiritual plane. And that's that's a way to ignore and avoid your emotions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not the way that things are supposed to be. You I mean, not everyone is has the same timeline. I understand that.
Mhm.
For someone, it can be 50 years of grief, or for someone else, it can be a year or 6 months. It
Yes.
doesn't matter. Everyone has their own timetable.
Yeah.
And so I'm not I'm not judging anybody by the way they handle things,
Mhm.
but we have to, in order to have a healthy relationship with our feelings, with our emotions, with our grief, is to do, self inventory and try to take responsibility for some of the things
Absolutely.
that we have done, and some of the things that we could have done different, and just take responsibility. And this is so hard for human beings to take responsibility. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. Nobody wants to take responsibility for anything that they have done. But this is not a way to live. We can't ignore everything that we have done, because it's very easy to put the blame on someone else,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Or a
because
failing relationship, perhaps.
because going looking at your blind spots and looking at your shadow side, that's painful.
It
So
is.
it's a lot easier to blame it on others. But as you say, then you are in a vicious circle because probably bringing it so not to go away from the horror film or the trauma films with trauma, sorry. So if we think of that Evil Dead Rising, maybe it's all about there's a collective aspect of it when there's all these character calling and investigating, finding out this book that is cursed and is bringing and is calling all the evil in the world, and it comes there. There's this collective unconscious that's pressurized and is being suppressed, and you cannot kill it, which is kind of a very Japanese idea, isn't it? You can't really erase it. But then it's how interesting how it comes, or it comes back at the time that the two sisters are trying to rebond again. And there's this kind of, maybe it's metaphorical and it's happening simultaneously at the time where they're trying to to reunite, they talking about the times that you were not there for me when I called you and now you're here.
Hmm.
So if we, I suppose, if we start peeling the onion again, we can see actually it's not so much about the evil that is being, the literal evil that is being called, but how it affects these people and the way that it takes over their bodies and they get abducted by this evil. So you're going up and down in your chair.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a comfortable way to basically sit. So, you're right. In the movie, I think it was she doing laundry when she was possessed the first time? She was she
Oh
was
yeah,
going somewhere with the elevator with the laundry, right?
that's
I
right.
think,
That's right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So she was doing her housework
Yes.
as a mother, right? As a
Yes.
single mother, she was
That's right.
doing housework
Yeah.
and she was overwhelmed. She didn't have a husband anymore. Her sister wasn't supportive. Her family wasn't supportive. And there were those three kids that she had to deal with. And it's a very tough thing to do by itself.
Yes. Yes.
But add on that a demon, it's basically impossible to deal with. So I think that that character, why she was the one that got possessed, was that she was the most vulnerable out of all of them because
Hmm.
she was feeling alone in the world with three kids to fend for, and she didn't know how to. And there was her little sister that also came into the picture. And she was also pregnant. She
Right.
didn't know that, but she was also pregnant.
Yep.
And so I think that it's the metaphorical thing. You know, demons are always metaphorical.
Yeah.
They prey on the vulnerable. You know, in supernatural, they always talk
Oh
about
yeah.
this.
Yeah.
They prey on the vulnerable
Yes.
because it's a metaphorical thing about the darkness of humanity when depression sets in, when the panic sets in, or suicidal thoughts set in. It's always when you're at your most vulnerable
So true.
time and place in the world. So horror films, especially supernatural horror films, um pick up on that,
Hmm.
and they use that in their narrative. That's why there are many horror films where the child is possessed. Why? Because they're defenseless,
Yes.
and basically nobody would believe them if they said there was a demon in their house. And "Hey, you should check the closet, you should check the underneath the bed." And parents are always evasive in these situations. They're like, "Oh, there's nothing there," but
Mm.
there is something there in these films.
Yes.
So
Yes. And it's also interesting how the child or the younger person is more in contact, more connected with the unconscious mind.
They
because
are.
they've not been so, how to say this, they've not been so influenced by all the egos and society and everything. So in a way, they're more pure in essence. They're more connected with
Hmm.
themselves. So they're more, they kind of, yeah, they have a different radar. So if you're open to everything, you're going to be filtering things because you're going to be sensing everything. This is like hypersensitive people. It's
Hmm.
not that you're not going to get affected because of the age you are. Also, well, the age has a factor. Just I'm thinking out loud. Well, yeah, age, because of being a child, you don't have so many walls. But also when you are an HSP, for example, you are so like a radar for external stimuli, feeling other people's senses, fears, traumas, everything they're going through. Some people walk into rooms and they can sense the tension and everything that's going on. So these people are probably, I can dare say, that they're more connected with themselves at a deeper level, whereas the rest of society, actually, they are the zombies of the world. They
Hmm.
are the ones that are walking and roaming without, okay, another day, just wait for the holidays to enjoy my life. So yeah, I think it's more complicated than we thought initially. The more you learn about the brain and how many in neuroscience, for example, now we're talking about multipotentialize and we're talking about neurodiversity. All these are probably the new food for monsters, you think? Or are they actually, it's like the other now, is it the monster? Which way is it going to go? It could go both ways, I guess. And I'm throwing too many questions, sorry.
Yeah, I thought about, my professor, my supervisor, MA supervisor, Professor Suzanne Court. She had a book called Little Horrors, Children in Horror Films.
Oh, okay.
And in this wonderful book, that basically made me chase her into the UCL, is about how horror films featuring children are about child abuse.
Right.
And it was quite phenomenal. When I read it, I was like, wait a minute. Yes, they are
Mhm.
actually. And talk about a lot of films. For example, The Ring. The Ring
Yes,
is a
yes,
little girl
sure.
basically pushed into a well.
That's right.
And before that, she's kept in the barn.
Mhm.
And this is severe child abuse
Yes.
from beginning to end. And now she's out there to avenge herself, killing many in her, in her revenge spree. And yeah, it opened doors for me in my mind, this book, and I recommend it to anybody
I will put that in
who's
there.
interested in psychology and horror.
Mhm.
And because everybody talks about, children in horror films and how they're scary and how they are uncanny, but she does the work to explain more why they are so uncanny.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think the monsters, the monsters in the films, the monsters everywhere, they're a way to they're a way to understand trauma,
Mhm.
because monsters in horror films, they represent the trauma itself.
Yeah.
They're traumatic, straight trauma. And
Yeah.
if we can get through a horror film without being actually killed, because we can't be killed, we are the audience. And then we feel the catharsis, the relaxation from watching our trauma on screen get mutilated, killed by a random, most likely a girl. They're ended, they're killed, and we feel safer
Hmm.
watching that play out, the
Yeah.
whole thing play out. So there are multiple reasons why people watch horror films.
Yeah.
Multiple
Yeah.
reasons. Sometimes it's for um just, taking, having fun. Sometimes it's like taking a date to a movie, and when you watch horror films, you are more inclined to get closer to your date.
Yeah.
And that's why teenagers especially love it.
Yeah.
And it can be that you can relieve your sadistic urges through a horror film by identifying with the killer, not the survivors.
That's right. Yeah.
And
All sorts going on. Yeah.
or you can identify with the survivor and finish the film feeling that you have dealt with your trauma and you're still alive, you're still ready to move on. Because you say to yourself, if this person whose 10 or so friends have been brutally murdered on screen
Yeah.
are able to move on with their lives after this film, because they're always shown, 1 year later, 2 years later, they're just having fun, they're living their life, moving on. You think that if they're able to survive this, then I'm also able to survive anything.
Yeah, but there's
Uh,
always lurking in the shadow, though. It's never
yeah, but
gone.
trauma always lurks because the monster is trauma. Trauma always lurks in the background. You can never kill it. In horror films, you can never kill the monster. It
Yeah.
will always come back.
Yeah, we said this.
Otherwise, there won't be a sequel.
No, but also because it's the reality, isn't it? I mean, you go to therapy and you're trying to heal your traumas, your problems, you're trying to move on, and the analyst or psychologist don't say to you, I'm going to give you a pill that's going to take it away. What he's saying to you is, you know that's there, you know to change your approach to it, which I think is fantastic. And when I was told this about family relationships and situations in the past, it was like, oh, so that was the key, not to fight, is actually to accept that's what it is. I'm just going to build my Superman, Superwoman cape and just not let it affect me. So sometimes it seems really obvious, and sometimes it's not that obvious, it's not that easy.
Mhm.
Yeah, you need to do this. Yeah, but how do I do that? My brain is going into other circles. But yeah, you're so right. Is people need to understand that we're not trying to erase trauma. We're trying to look at
Make peace with
it.
it.
Yes, that's right. That's the expression. Yes, exactly that. Make peace with it. Yes, and we're not going to have time for elaborating more on the Midnight Club, which I would have loved to, but we could do that
Yeah,
another time.
of course, yeah. I can elaborate a little bit more, because Midnight Club is very important. I like Mike Flanagan. I love Mike
Love
Flanagan.
you, love my Flanagan.
I love Mike Flanagan. I think he's the best. And now that I've learned that he's directing the new Exorcist movie,
Oh yeah,
I'm so happy. I'm so happy it's in safe hands.
it is.
One of my favorite horror films the sequel is in safe hands. I'm so happy.
Good.
And also by, we talked about The Exorcist. I I implore everybody to watch the Exorcist TV series that ran for 2 seasons, and it's a great show on trauma and grief. It's unbelievable that how we let this amazing show, get cancelled after 2 seasons.
Well, sometimes
It's
it's
unbelievable.
yeah, it's like there was this 1899, was it 1896? I can't remember. They one after Dark, the same producers of Dark. It was so complicated to understand that second production that they didn't do a sequel. They didn't let them, and they had audience, but there was a lot of people that didn't quite understand what
Mhm.
was going on because it was too deep, too twisted, and people can't think. And well, it's not fair what I'm saying because it is
Yeah.
complicated stuff.
This show, Exorcist,
Mm.
has Gina Davis
Oh my God.
as the main lead in its first season, and the
Oh,
second season has John Cho, who I love very much. I think he's a great actor, on the lead with Alicia Witt. And how how did we let this get cancelled? Is
wow.
beyond me, because the
Yeah.
stories, the stories of the both seasons are amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's a great depiction of trauma, loss, grief. It's unbelievable. If you have time, watch it. It is on Amazon Prime on Turkey, but I don't know if it's in Spain.
I'll have a look because we've got Amazon
So,
Prime and Netflix, but sometimes we don't get
uh,
things.
so the Midnight Club. The Midnight Club is basically these kids, right, who are terminally ill, which is a, nicer word for saying they're about to die in a few months, if even that is a hopeful statement. And while watching this show, I thought to myself, I thought about the first book that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote.
Right.
It's called On Death and Dying.
Hmm.
And it was the first time, I think it was 1969, it was the first time that someone talked about the feelings, the stages that people who are dying, who are terminally ill, are going through.
Hmm.
And for years, this was talked about as if she wrote this book on people who are losing people. No, she wrote this on people who were actually dying
Yeah.
and how you can grieve yourself. And she was bullied so much into that whole grief thing that she actually wrote a second book called
Yeah.
On Grief and On Grieving
Yeah.
with David Kessler. And in that book, now they talked about the stages that people uh feel when they're losing a loved one. But the first book was about the dying themselves.
Yeah.
So when I watched The Midnight Club, I thought about the first book immediately because there were all these stages, we always talk about denial, and then comes anger, and then comes bargaining, depression, and acceptance. But these are not, I cannot stress this enough because she thought about this for her entire life. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross didn't write these stages to be linear. They can't be circular. They can't be, you can skip some stages, and it's not, set in stone that you are starting from this point to that point. But sometimes you can, actually. And, these stages, as I said before, they're all being shown to us at the Midnight Club because I think Mike Flanagan is a huge fan of grief and
Yeah.
probably Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work as well. I didn't see any interview acknowledging that, but
Interesting.
I
Oh,
I've
yeah.
heard some interviews of him where he acknowledges that he wants to talk about loss and grief.
Right.
And yeah,
Yeah, you can see
I
that through
think
all his work, can't you? Yeah, now that you
yeah,
mention
you can. You can. You can. We talked
that.
about this in
Yeah.
our previous episode on the Hill House.
Yes.
You can see those stages on Hill House in Hill House quite clearly, and also in the Midnight Club, where they are. The main character is in denial because she was going to a really good Ivy League school.
Right.
She doesn't want to be the cancer kid, but she somehow ends up that way.
Yeah.
And then comes the bargaining. Is there a cure? Can we get better? Is there a way to get better? And then you come to, anger where, they're angry that they're dying, especially that one character, she's very angry that she's dying. And then comes depression where they're at the realization state that they're actually going to die and this is their very short lifespan. And then acceptance comes. And the show ends basically on the acceptance terms where these kids come to accept that they're actually dying. It's okay. It's okay.
Hmm.
And things happen, Not everyone gets to live to their, 90s, right? It's a very hard pill to swallow. I'm aware.
Yeah.
I would feel the same way if I were diagnosed tomorrow. I would
Yeah,
feel the same way,
it doesn't matter
and
how old you are.
everybody would, I think.
Yeah.
But there comes a time where you have to accept it,
Yeah, well, there's
and
not no other way, is it? Otherwise, then you put yourself and other people at risk as well. And maybe by trying to fight the unavoidable, you're actually making the illness worse.
yeah,
If
yeah.
we
In the case of the show,
yeah.
you're making it worse
Yes,
for
yes,
everyone around you.
absolutely, absolutely. Which is there's a probably we could make another probably program on its own, or maybe turn it into a course because I think there's so much to unpack there as well, regarding again the figure of the Great Mother that appears there, the female figures, and
Mhm.
how someone this character you always liked that she was Beth in the Midnight Mass, and
Yeah, yeah.
the name here is Sasha. Is it? I was looking at the name before because I've forgotten, I'll tell you. Um, the one that is dealing with the herbs, it looks such a nice, yeah, Shasta, that she's like such a brilliant figure. And
Mhm.
actually, she turns the way she does turn in the end. And for me, that's such a fantastic, yeah, a character that is so rounded and in so many layers again. And it's very key in the story. It's so key
Yeah.
because it connects, it makes these kids connect with something ancient, with
Hmm.
something the origin of life as well. But it's life and death. It's like a yin yang in itself. She's got the two sides and all the folklore behind it. I mean, it's fantastic. Which again, we cannot really detach ourselves from that cultural aspect. We come from where we come from, so we might be able to heal using that folklore, those stories, those myths. And
Those are also horror stories
sure, yes, 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 a lot
that
of
heal them, try to heal them emotionally.
yeah. They try to explain the world. There was a program I attended yesterday, and they were saying, "What's the difference between a fairy tale, and a myth?" And they weren't quite sure, clear how to define it. And it's because the myth explains the origin of
Origin, yeah.
things of the world, whereas folklore is more like the everyday situations and peoples and experiences. So there are lessons in both cases, but one is the origins. And I think that people, when they're grieving and when they are in a situation like that, they try to find why this happened and how
Yeah.
far back can I go to maybe if I change that beginning, maybe
Yeah.
this won't happen. So yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot of there. So we could talk about, the rediscovery of horror films in adulthood, how that is so interesting, maybe for another episode again. The
Hmm.
psychological impact is something that we keep talking frequently. We can't move away from that. Healing from trauma, obviously, this is your thing. Um, Cutting ties for mental health, that's an interesting topic that's been coming up. Connection between horror and personal growth is there. I mean, we're not mentioning it literally all the time, but is there. It helps you grow, whether it's because you are ill and you're gonna end up,
Yeah,
your life is gonna end up soon, or because you're in a situation that life is bringing you
exactly.
nasty things. It doesn't matter. Um, Maybe at some point we could talk about these generational differences in horror film and perception, which we kind of
Yeah,
touched on because it's like, yeah, before we saw horror films this way, but now we have more information. So we can actually look at the depth that they have. Why teens love horror movies, you've mentioned that. And to confront personal demons, we've mentioned that. And I think these are the topics that are going to keep coming up um in our stories, in our interviews and chats, because also the role of horror in modern culture, which kind of brings me back to our for people to watch again and to visit our the shadowy truth behind modern times, behind modern no glasses, terror and gothic trends, which we did together. And because we do talk about a lot of these things there, and for people to also watch again our past videos, because we kind of we keep coming back to the same stuff by using new productions, but we are always spinning around the same topics. And we both hope that this can help people. It would be great to have some comments as well to see if anybody wanted to be your guinea pig, and you could ask them questions,
Yeah, I could ask some questions and they can engage in a conversation with us.
Exactly. So then we can produce more content around what they really need and want. So and keep peeling the onion, which is very interesting. So would you like to add anything else before we finish for today?
No, I'm waiting for the comments, as you
Wait a
said.
minute. Yes. Yeah, because that one last comment was fantastic to
Yeah, it was a
see.
fantastic addition to the entire talk.
Absolutely. So we encourage you all. So thank you for another great session. We have pending now Supernatural and other things. And we'll talk very soon. And considering this was episode 13, we've not really talked about Friday the 13th, but you have done.
Yeah, we have not.
In other episodes, I think we have touched on that too. So we'll put every comment, every reference on the comments, so then people can go back and rewatch and even buy books that you have recommended. It's always very
Good,
useful.
good. I recommend it.
Okay, excellent. So thank you very much, and talk to you in the next
No
episode.
problem.
We'll
Talk
talk.
to you.
Thank you. Bye.